nets, Sashi. Clear the nets. Clear the nets. IFP check is good. Be right back. Huh? The lady with the arm. I got you. What we can tell you, and we just heard this from about shots that were just coming out every about half an hour. So we're on MLK, not far from where Nicole's position is. But every shot, every calculus, if you rather every FBI agent, I will tell you that the anxiety level of parents just increases every. They still have students here locked down. We're talking 30,000 students here, sitting yes, to be told that your child is safe, that they're not in harm's way, that you will be able to get them. Those are just words, I'm sure, for a lot of parents who are wondering whether or not they're going to be able to see their child in the next few minutes or the next few hours. I say that because there has been no movement in this crime scene here along MLK in terms of moving back or apparatus moving away from the crime scene. We are literally paralyzed. Some kind of update for that has either started just a few minutes ago or will be starting shortly at Grant 30. It's about 7 blocks away from where we are right now. We did not have the option of driving there or walking there. Our crew order force simply would not have made it. There are police officers that are standing guard and semi-automatic to multiple jurisdictions. So there is no really unified chain of communication in terms of who's in charge and telling everyone what to do at the time. You go to a block, you'll be told by one officer to go in one direction, go to the next block, and hear different instructions. You understand? And so are a lot of parents here wondering when they're going to receive some kind of update about their child. All of them here in Jersey, 30,000 students, frozen, on lockdown, inside the school. We're live in Jersey City. Jake Dow, explain this.
Now leave it in here. You have to hold it down. So you're here saying you have to hold it down.
Yes, I still remember two other parents. All of them were one parent who was automated robocalls, just giving an update before Superintendent Frederick talking about the robocalls that were going to happen again. She took that call and she immediately hung it up and she didn't feel like it was information that we want right now. Stand back for a second.
And again, I want to just say thank you to the Port Authority, the NYPD, all the other agencies that supported us, and of course, a tough day for the Jersey Police Department.
Any idea how this started? What started?
No, it's still under investigation.
What building?
I don't want to give that information at this point.
About the assailants?
No, not at this point. Anything else?
And how many deceased are we talking about outside the building?
We could confirm there's multiple deceased inside the building, and all the schools in the location are secure. They will be secure for the foreseeable future until we feel comfortable to release all the children. But all the children are accounted for, and we'll provide more information on that shortly. Again, I just want to say it's a tough day for the Jersey City Police Department. These people work tirelessly in very, very tough conditions, and we're going to notify the family, but it's one of our best police officers, and a tough day for Jersey Police Department.
Just to clarify, how many officers were injured?
Two officers.
Thank you very much. There's no indication of that.
Where'd you go?
Here right now. I'll try to make my way down here. They're saying that there were two incidents.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
One in that deli that was
Clear the street that way.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Clear the street that way.
Clear path for the emergency. Ladies and gentlemen, please pull over to the side, please. Do me a favor, everybody get up on the sidewalk.
Guys, you have to move. There's a vehicle coming through. There's a vehicle coming through.
Watch your back, watch your back. Car coming through, watch your back. Oh no, I'm on zero.
Watch your back.
It's just the rain.
You cannot be in the street. 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 They're not on the street. You cannot be in the street.
Right in my shot. I know. Just don't go in front of my camera, and you can make it as tough as you want. Listen, I have eyes on every side of my head, and they're looking at me. Come back here where you were when we started. I think the clients are going to be okay with the way the crowd works. Just don't get in my way, or else I'm going to get in your way, and then your clients are not going to be happy with your system. Okay? It's all simple. Stick in front of the person. And I told you for a second, so just fucking relax.
understanding that the scene was a kosher deli, a kosher market, where this whole incident wound up. Because oddly enough, I believe he said that it started at the Bayville Cemetery. He said that was the beginning of the 2 incidents, and whether they were chased there, how they got there, we're not sure. There's been a lot of talk about a white truck that they may have been getting out of. We heard a few witnesses say the same thing about this white truck. So perhaps this started at the cemetery and then just wound up in this kosher market, of which police and the authorities have just gone into. And once again, they didn't indicate whether or not they were sure as to whether among the dead were the suspects. Perhaps that was a given, but I certainly didn't get that impression.
And we did see earlier when we were looking at video near Bayview Avenue that white U-Haul truck where the door was open in that truck. So it's still unclear how that factored into the situation. But one thing that they did say definitively is that there is no indication of terrorism.
Yeah, and that's been a big point of speculation in the last few hours of where this started, how it started, and the fear that it could be part of a larger plot. I mean, we were reporting earlier that President Trump was briefed on this because that's the nature of the world we live in now, that if you are in law enforcement, and as we said earlier, the NYPD was certainly, I'm sure John Miller and the groups in that organized, the terrorism organization that were in New York City, the organization to fight terrorism in New York, they are on this, and they're trying to determine whether it's part of a larger plot. And quite frankly, I'll bet it's quite possible that they are not 100% sure either. If they couldn't tell us what was the motive, sometimes you don't know whether other people were involved. Did someone else flee? Was there another gunman who got away from the scene? We just don't know that right now. We didn't get a lot of information except to say there are, as he put it, multiple deceased inside the building.
Right, and so it just really captures, we heard the witnesses before talking about the gunshots and how terrifying that was for them to hear that. But this, knowing even more details now, it really captures the magnitude of this incident here on a residential street, what was supposed to be just a regular afternoon, when hundreds of bullets started flying, literally hundreds of bullets, people ducking for cover, locking themselves in their businesses, lying on the floor of their home, just taking cover. The schools are on lockdown still. Students are still in school. The medical center is locked down. You've got exits on the highway that have been blocked off to divert traffic from that area.
If indeed, as it would appear that authorities perhaps believe that the situation, at least as of now, is neutralized, at least at that particular scene, you would think that at some point the lockdown would be lifted. But it's just not clear right now. It seemed there were some questions left unanswered at that press conference that we just didn't get. Among them is, okay, does that mean we could start ending the lockdowns? It's just not clear right now.
Right.
It's one of those incidents where you got some information, but then it just raises more questions.
Absolutely, especially since it started at Bayview Cemetery, they said. Yeah. And wondering, how does that factor in?
How does a shooting start at the cemetery? It sounds like a strange situation.
How does that factor in?
And also, the other thing is that we've learned, and we've seen and we've heard, it appears that these 2 gunmen had perhaps multiple weapons, at least one, and a lot of automatic weapons fire. So what was the point of all the ammunition? Where were they going from? Where were they going to? Was this some sort of an interception? It's just not clear at this point. But the real tragedy right now is that we know that 1 officer has been shot dead, 2 were shot in the shoulder, 2 others were hit by shrapnel.
Yeah, very, very sad situation today. Very sad situation. And, you know, these officers are continuing to work. They're very much on alert, knowing this, that one of their own has died as a result of this situation, that others are in the hospital. And, you know, one thing that we also didn't learn about is just when they say multiple are deceased inside of a building, who else does that include? You know, because so many people were around. People were just going about their everyday life, doing what they had to do for the day, and they got caught in all of this whole situation. So we are waiting to hear more information on that. So that's great. But we've got reporters all across the area talking to witnesses. We've heard a lot from witnesses.
All right, we have on the phone right now, Brian, just say one more time, we're speaking to Sudan Thomas, and he is the Jersey City School Board President. Mr. Thomas, we're just wondering right now, we understand a lot of schools are on lockdown in Jersey City. What is their status right now? Mr. Thomas? Well, we're having a little problems hearing him right now, but we'd like to find out what is the status of these schools. Many in the area, we're told 12 in about the immediate area.
Okay,
have
can
been,
you hear me?
I think, Mr. Thomas, we hear you now. It's Dick Brunel and Jerry Klein-Thomas here on CBS 2, and we're wondering right now, what, if anything, can you tell us about these schools on lockdown? Has that status changed at all?
No. All of our 43 schools, the 43 Jersey City public schools, continue to be on lockdown. Our students are safe. We have 30,000 students attending our schools. They're all within our school buildings. They're safe. They're all accounted for. We have 6,000 employees in our school district. They're all accounted for. They're all safe. And at this point, the lockdown continues until we hear a complete all clear from the Jersey City Police Department. We will not be lifting the lockdown. You know, we are getting close to the 4 o'clock hour. And at this point, the district administration is beginning to look at the possibility of an extended evening, and we're even provisioning possible food and snacks to be brought in if the lockdown is going to continue for some more time.
And for those schools that are closer to the scene, what's the protocol for them? Are they in a basement or in the cafeteria or a gym? What's the protocol?
So most of the active shooter drills that we have calls for blinds to be drawn down, classroom doors to be locked, kids under the desks or in closets within the classrooms. Depending on the structure of the buildings, sometimes they're all congregated in a gym or a basement. But for the most part, it's about securing each location individually so that the kids in a classroom are secured. That's been historically the pattern of our drills, so that we can account for kids within each group and each location.
Now, Mr. Thomas, you're talking about 43 schools. I would imagine that is both private and public, all different types of schools?
No, I'm talking about the 43 public schools.
Just the public schools, okay.
Yes, just the public schools. We also have possibly about 10 charter schools and a bunch of private schools. I do know that all of the charter schools are also on lockdown, and all of the private schools, including the religious, the Catholic schools, they continue to be on lockdown. I don't expect any of the schools to lift the lockdowns, at least speaking for the public schools. We will not lift the lockdowns until we receive a all clear. And even when we do receive the all clear, we plan to stagger the dismissals, because we don't think, given the situation that's in the city at this point, it's not going to be a smart thing to put 30,000 kids on the street at the same time. So, again, we're close to the 4 o'clock hour, so the district administration is already planning possibly for an extended lockdown. So we are looking at the possibility of bringing in food and snacks for the kids as well, if this goes on for a couple of more hours.
Do you have any provisions, plans ahead of time for something like this, where you could go get food? Has this been sort of strategized before? Did you ever have an idea that this could happen?
Well, the good thing is that we do provide breakfast and lunch for 30,000, all of our 30,000 children every day. And, we have 23 production centers where we cook every day, and then the remaining 20 schools are pre-plated, which means we get food from outside. It comes in a pre-plated situation. So our schools are equipped on an ongoing basis to manage, the breakfast and lunch every day for these kids. So we have some ability to, turn around, in a situation like this. But obviously, these are unfortunate experiences from which we have to take learnings and move forward. And, this is something that we have to take forward into our policies in the future to see if there is a situation like this that extends beyond, school hours. How do we actually provision to, feed these kids? If you remember last year on November 15th, when we had that storm, we had a lot of kids staying back in various school districts outside of Jersey City. So, this has happened in the past where kids have had to stay overnight. I'm not suggesting that it's going to happen tonight, but, in terms of food, we have in-house production facilities within the school districts, within the school buildings. So if this goes on for a couple of hours, I think we have the ability to turn around food for these kids in short order.
Mr. Thomas, I know that parents are watching this and they're seeing these images of SWAT officers. It's very much of a scary scene. What is your message to parents right now?
It's a very, very clear message that I want to give out to the parents of Jersey City. Every child in Jersey City in the public school system is safe. they're accounted for, and they are inside of our school buildings, and our teachers are taking care of them, our employees are taking care of them, and we are in complete control of the situation as far as the perimeter of the school is concerned, and our children and our employees. At this point, we're asking parents to not come to the school buildings because we do not yet have an all clear. Once we have the all clear and we have a dismissal schedule in place, then parents can come in and we can start releasing the kids, because we want to keep the streets clear for law enforcement to go up and down if they have to. It seems to be an ongoing operation at this point of time.
Can we ask you, Mr. Thomas, is there a place where people can go, perhaps a website, to get information if there is an update? Because not always they'll have the ability to necessarily be in front of a television if an announcement is made.
Okay, so ever since the situation, started unfolding, the school district has been, consistently giving out communication to parents through robocalls. So every parent receives a call and they get an update, and also through email. So they are continuously updated, and of course those updates are also put on our website and on our social media pages. But at the same time, we have a very well-oiled system of reaching out and updating parents, and I'm in touch with the district administration, with the superintendent's office, Mr. Walker's office, and I think they're in full control of the situation. And if any parent is looking for any information at this point, the best bet would be to go to the school district website, which is www.jcboe.org, or to our social media pages on Facebook, where all the continuous updates are being updated. But I'm sure these guys are also getting their robocalls and emails as well.
Okay. Superintendent Thomas, the Jersey City School Board President, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for your coverage. Take care.
Okay.
And Jessica Layton has been talking to a lot of parents. She's just blocks away from two schools. Jessica, we've got you live back out there. What are you seeing now?
Well, I just talked to a couple of mothers, and the one woman said, quite frankly, I am freaking out right now that I cannot go get my kid. If this thing is over, and it seems like it is, why won't they let me go get my son? And we just heard that gentleman speaking to that. They are still asking parents to stay away, but it's just been such an emotionally charged and very tense day that people just want to get their arms around their kids, and that's understandable, but they also need to listen to the authorities. These are some of those folks walking behind me right now who were upset that they weren't able to go get their children. After that live news conference that we brought to you a few minutes ago, there was an arrest. It appeared to be a disorderly conduct arrest. Again, emotions extremely charged. One man started yelling obscenities at the officers and just started kind of unraveling in front of everybody. He was arrested on the couple of feet behind my photographer, and he was taken in. So just one more thing that the Jersey City police officers are having to deal with. I also wanted to pass along, it had to be about an hour or so ago when those SWAT team officers started going down this block, we saw bomb-sniffing dogs going in with them, and we weren't sure exactly why at this time. In fact, the NYPD bomb squad was also called in for help. We are told that this is precautionary. When you have a shooting or any kind of attack at this level, you never know if there are booby traps set up. You never know if something else has been planted that could detonate. So bomb squads were called in, the bomb-sniffing dogs were called in. At this point, we're being told that all of that is clear. Again, the latest from the mayor and from the public safety director here is that at least one officer was killed. Another person inside that building was killed. And then we also know that the two shooters, we're being told now, were found deceased in the building where this all unfolded just after noon today. And then we have several other people who are hurt in the hospital with shrapnel injuries from the gunfire. Again, at least 3 or 4 rounds of rapid succession gunfire. And I know Alice and Hazel and myself have been talking about this today, but we can't reiterate it enough how frightening it was to be so close to those shots, to hear them, to be possibly feet away from them, and to have officers literally tell people to duck, and then for me personally, turn around and get away. This area is not safe. So at this point, at least people are starting to breathe a sigh of relief. The biggest tension now, the fact that moms and dads still aren't able to go get their children from school. I just keep kind of turning around just to see what's happening behind me. Again, we still have the Jersey City Fire Department here. There are still a couple of ambulances on scene, but things have calmed down considerably, and now everyone's just waiting to go get their kids and to be able to go back into their homes. But that deli is quite a significant crime scene right now, so it is going to take a long time for police here to do their investigation. And again, this is a federal investigation. ATF is here. It is going to take a long time for that block where that bodega is to open up and for life to return back to normal. Dick and Andrea, I'll send it back to you.
All right, Jessica Layton, stand by at the scene. We're going to give you an update right now as to what we know. We understand there are 4 dead in the store where the shootings took place, 2 victims and 2 shooters, and we're told this incident started earlier the day in a cemetery.
The Bayview Cemetery. And then officers thought that the 2 individuals were suspicious and engaged them. According to our sources, suspects got in a U-Haul and then went to the building. That's a corner store on Bayview and MLK, and that's where everything really seemed to unfold.
And we had heard from witnesses earlier, and of course at the time we weren't sure of how accurate it was, but we'd heard from witnesses who said they had seen that U-Haul there. We saw the U-Haul on tape, and we didn't quite know what it was from, but one of the witnesses said that he thought that they were engaging the people in the U-Haul, so that certainly seemed to be the case. Now, what was going on at the cemetery? They were looking suspicious. We don't know what that could have been. Perhaps there was some sort of exchange of weapons going on in that cemetery that engaged the officers, but now we're told that 4 people are dead, 2 victims and 2 shooters, and of course now what has to be determined, if police, they haven't given the so-called all clear, that's what the schools are waiting for, and perhaps they're worried about another gunman who could have been connected, could have gotten away. I certainly think that's what their suspicion is, or their worry is right now, even though they can't be sure.
Yeah, and this all unfolded in a kosher grocery store right there where those victims and then the shooters were right now. So it's still an active scene, very much of an active scene. As you were saying, they've got to dot their I's, cross their T's, eliminate everything. But this all started around 12:45 this afternoon. And now that we have these details, it really kind of creates a clearer picture of what witnesses were telling us, was that the officers were there immediately. We said that earlier, that it's just that the officers were already there because they were pursuing those suspects then, and that they were in unmarked cars. One witness said that the officers were there and SWAT was there shortly after, and everything really just started to unfold. Witnesses talked about hearing hundreds of gunshots going off, then stopping, then going off again, then stopping.
So it appears, at least now, that the scene is neutralized, particularly there. Perhaps law enforcement is worried about someone else who may or may not be on the loose. But right now, they gave no indication of that. But they have told us that 4 people were dead inside that store. At the time of that press conference, they didn't make it clear that they knew that it included the shooters. But apparently, that's what they meant to say. That was apparently implied, that they believe that 2 of the shooters, the other 2 victims, it's not clear who they were. Earlier, we were told that 1 law enforcement person was shot and that 2 others were hit in the shoulder and that 2 others had so-called shrapnel wounds. Okay, right now, we're going to go back to the scene where CBS 2's Kieran Dillon is there with more information right now. Kieran, what can you tell us?
Well, Dick and Andrea, we are here at Jersey City Medical Center, where this is where we have just been told that some of the victims, we don't know if all of them, but at least one of the victims was brought to be treated after this shooting. So you can see police crews are here directing traffic and really monitoring who's going into and out of the trauma center at all times. As you mentioned, the hospital is currently on lockdown and has been for several hours. I actually walked around when my photographer and I got here. We walked around the periphery a short while ago, trying to see if I could speak to people, and was told no one but staff or patients and their families are allowed to go in and out of the medical center. And at one point, I even saw what appeared to be doctors or nurses standing outside the building. So they're really limiting who's going into the hospital, but they also have brought people outside at different points. Very limited information right now exactly why, but I should say that Jersey City Medical Center did send out a tweet earlier really saying that everybody was safe. So this is an active scene. As you can see, crews are here, but we don't believe there's any concern concern inside the hospital. They're just trying to keep everything under control. We're waiting to see if any officials will be speaking to us here at Jersey City Medical Center, and if they do, we will bring that to you live. Reporting live in Jersey City, Kieran Dillon, CBSN New York.
Right, Kieran Dillon, thanks very much at Jersey City Medical Center.
And it's important to note that medical center, as Kieran was saying, is on lockdown.
Right.
Just as a precaution. That's why people aren't being allowed in and out unless you've got somebody in there. But it's just best to stay clear of the whole area.
You know, the next big question is something that Jessica Layton addressed just a few moments ago, that she literally used the word parents were, quote, freaked out by the situation, knowing that their kids are still on lockdown in 43 public schools, and in addition to many of the private Catholic schools. One, Sacred Heart, which is almost adjacent to that store we've been telling you about. So you have to wonder now, what is it going to take before authorities can say, okay, it's okay to start letting some of the kids off lockdown? I mean, presumably, right off the top of your head, you would say that all 43 schools, there are many that are not in this crime scene area, and then at that point you could let kids go. But that would not include the fact that perhaps law enforcement is saying, hey, A, this could be part of a larger plot, or B, that there could have been one gunman who may have gotten away, and then which we have no information about. I can only say what they might be speculating on. But it will call into question how long they will wait keeping these kids on lockdown, because as the president of the Jersey City School Board told us just a few minutes ago, you know, at some point you got to start worrying about food for these kids. What do you do about it? He mentioned last November 15th when we had the big snowstorm, when they had a situation where kids were left there. The good news is that these schools have breakfast and lunch, so presumably there's some food on hand. But let's face it, you got a lot of kids in school, and after a while the kids are going to get a little antsy, to say the least.
Absolutely antsy, but they still have to wait for that all clear. I'm sure that law enforcement at this point is just trying to rule things out. They have to be sure, especially after the day that they've had here today. So again, the 43 schools are on lockdown, 30,000 students plus staff. Everyone is safe. They are telling parents, don't try to pick up your kids right now. It's not going to happen. Although we understand the frustration of parents.
Absolutely.
And, you know, they're seeing this video and seeing these armored trucks. They're seeing SWAT, and they're afraid. They just want to grab their kids. They want to give their kids a hug, and that's completely understandable. But your kids are safe in school right now. But when that all clear is given, there will be staggered dismissal, so they're just not putting all 30,000 kids on the road at the same time.
And you can only imagine what the teachers had to go through, because these teachers having to keep these kids calm, many of them, including that Sacred Heart School, which was right there, they're hearing all the gunfire. They're hearing it loud and clear. So you can imagine the terror on these, for the kids, and also the terror for the teachers, because they don't know what's going on. And so a lot of people have had to really do some seriously difficult work today, among them the teachers of the Jersey City school system.
Yeah, and the staff were told that they have to pull down the blinds and get the kids into a safe area, and like in the center of the school, so they, you know, stay safe. And some of these kids, the parents are saying, oh, my child's 11 years old. I mean, how do you process this at 11 years old?
No, all right. Tara Jakeway is very near to the scene right now in Jersey City. We're going back to her live now. Tara, what can you tell us right now?
Let me know. Hey guys, so there was something that I would assume would be a good sign that just happened here. If you can see right over my shoulder here, there's a ladder. Now we saw tactical teams going door to door here, asking if they could have access to people's homes, to their roofs, to their back windows, because we're about 100 yards away from Martin Luther King Boulevard, where this was all going down. They were trying to get better positioning so that they could access the incident and the area. Now we just saw them actually pack up their things on top of that roof there of the Salvation Army and climb down that ladder, which I can only assume is a good thing. Of course, they're packing everything up back there. You can see the Hudson County Sheriff's truck back there. Business seems to be coming down to a halt here. We have people out in the street wondering what happened. We actually just spoke to a man who was inside that building, was inside that Salvation Army when this all went down. He said he heard the shots, he saw smoke, and then moments later they had a tactical team come in and get them all out. Now he's still here, he's still on this block, and when I asked him why he's here and hasn't evacuated the area as authorities told them to, he said his car is still in the area and it's still on lockdown and he needs it to get home. But again, they're recommending still, as you said, those schools are still on lockdown, and they're recommending that people avoid the area. But some good signs here for sure, Andrea and Dick.
That's right, Tara. Thanks so much. I've got a question for you. Do you find that residents are kind of standing there just waiting to go back home?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking at a bunch of them right now. There's a couple dozen. Everybody's out on their porches. I think some are here because they have belongings inside the quarantined area, but large in part is most people are out here just to find out exactly what's going on. This is their community. This is their neighborhood. It's a very residential area, and as you can imagine, when something like this plays out in front of you, curiosity gets the better of everyone. So as you can see, people popping out of their front doors here. And
we're losing Tara Jakeway. Her live shot is going in and out. I guess the next big thing we want to know from that location is when those schools, we know at least one of them is right next to the scene, when they could actually lift the lockdown. I would imagine if that happens, there's going to be a large law enforcement sort of task force to get those kids out of there because there'll be a lot of kids.
But Tara is saying that it seems like they are doing the work.
Is relaxing.
It's neutralized right now, and
so it'd be weird. It'd be weird to keep the kids in there when everybody else is relaxing. But like I said, I think they're going to take this very carefully and very slowly.
That's right. And we spoke to somebody a little bit ago who was a witness to this, who lives in the neighborhood. Tara, you heard her talk about that.
Right.
This is folks' neighborhood and how difficult it is for them to really live through this whole ordeal. They're going to be processing this for a long time. So let's listen to what that person had to say.
When I went to Salvation Army, I was shopping for a few moments, and all I heard was pow, pow, pow. So I thought it was the guys maybe down the corner, you know, someone playing with fireworks. And then all of a sudden, the noise just started going pow, 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 pow. I see all these unmarked cars, unmarked guys jumping out of their cars, taking stands and start shooting. And then all of a sudden, I know a bullet hit one tire, got a flat. I'm looking at it right out the window at Salvation Army, and I see the cops backing up. They're yelling, get back in the place. So all of a sudden, the way it was going, it was like a war zone. Pow, 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 pow. I see them start backing up. So I said to myself, wow, what could be going on? So by the time SWAT and all of them got there, and they were still shooting, and I see SWAT's truck backing up, and the guys behind the truck, instead of being on the side, start backing up behind the truck. I'm saying to myself, this must be some terrorist stuff. So to me, this was like something. I'm 62 years old. Like I said, I never experienced so much gun power. I mean, this was a lot. I watched the ID channel. I watched SWAT. But when I see SWAT backing up like that, that ain't the SWAT I watch on TV. And this is the real action too. And I watch the real action on TV. These guys, I don't know what, but it was a war zone. It was gun power. And I have never experienced nothing like that in my life.
How long was it going on? And describe for me what it's
constantly, 15 minutes at a time, then it might stop another 20 minutes at a time, I guess, when they go on the routine to try to put, come up on me. But they were basically, they had to be stuck behind the building because like I said, I thought it was terrible. I know I heard about Jersey City's finest, and I know they don't play around. Yeah. But this gun power and this was a war zone, and there was a lot of gunpowder coming at him. So
yeah, police have not been able to confirm for us how many people were inside that building firing out. Based on what you heard, how many people do you think could have been? Could it have been just a one person or two people?
It got to be 4 or 5. I don't know. Listen, let me tell you something. If it was one person, he had to be using 2 hands. Or if it was 2 persons, both of them had it, and they had to be Uzis or something. Because like I said, it was repetitious, the power. It was repetitious. I mean, this gunpowder is repetitious. But they stood their ground for a while. But I mean, I'm not mad at them. You know what I mean? That was the way I heard, the way I was seeing it come at them and blowing out the tires and them back. Listen, I mean, they want to go home too. You know what I mean? Let it. I mean, you need a little artillery. Like I said, once I see SWAT, I know the SWAT that I see. I watch the ID channel. That's my favorite channel, Justice Channel. Yeah. And I didn't get the action that the SWAT I see on TV, and I know this is the real action too, but, I seen the truck back up and the guys go behind. I don't know the situation up ahead, but from my view, let me tell you something. It was a war zone.
Now, you said these officers obviously want to go home, and you wanted to go home too, but were you afraid in there at all?
Well, I knew it had nothing to do with me. I was just worried about somebody coming in, because I believe several bullets hit the bottom of the store and ricocheted off. But I knew the battle didn't have nothing to do with me in general or us in the store. So basically, as long as I wasn't wearing a uniform, I guess I was all right. But I stood to the back, but I didn't want to be nobody's hostage either.
I'm just going to ask you, where were you? What did you do once you heard the gunfire?
Well, at first, I was up near the front. I got a little nosy, but when it started getting repetitious like that, I realized it started ricocheting off, and the cops were backing up, and they blew out the tires. Now I figured it was time to go to the back of the building.
So how many people were in there?
There's about 12 of us in there, about 12.
So, well, obviously you're out here. So what happened? What transpired?
Well, SWAT came in and escorted us all out, told us to put our hands on the head, and they escorted us all out. So they got us all to safety, which I got to give them, you know, I mean, that's, you know, that you pay the tax dollars, and that's, you know, I appreciate it. I'm thankful.
You were literally then standing in the middle of that, what you called a war zone. What did it look like?
We were directly in the middle. Cars, unmarked cars, tires blown out, cars all over the street. They can't get to the cars. They're behind the building there. All of them are holding their, you know, their guns, M16s and all that. I mean, it's just, like I told you, I never experienced something like that. I'm 62 years old. I've seen little shots and stuff like that, but this was the real deal.
Yeah, the real deal. Yeah. And folks wished it wasn't real because it was terrifying moments for them right there in their neighborhood, and it seems as though things have neutralized.
Yeah, and then the really good news we can update you on is right about now, because it's about to turn 4:15, all public schools on lockdown will be lifted at 4:15. So right now, those kids who are in those schools are finally going to be able to get out, and parents are probably breathing a large sigh of relief right now. And that's the biggest indication right now that it seems that the situation is now contained, because that was probably the last thing left before, I'm not going to say a return to normalcy, but that neighborhood is certainly trying to get back to some level of normalcy after what they saw today. Absolutely,
and so parents should be receiving a robocall or go on the website, jcboe.org, is what we were told earlier, to figure out how the dismissal process is going to work, because students will be dismissed and the dismissals will be staggered. Yeah, so they're not putting all the kids out. You got to wait for the parents to get there. Presumably, if some of the parents are coming to pick the kids up, we know some of those kids, there's a Catholic school right across from where that store shooting was, and they will be getting out pretty soon. So we'll have to wait and see what the logistics are. But at least for now, the lockdown is being lifted, and those kids will be getting out of there pretty soon. And that means that they got the all clear from law enforcement. So that is good news right now. Let's just go over what police are telling us about what happened here today. It was about 12:45 in the afternoon. There was some sort of engagement between Jersey City police officers and, we believe, two people, a man and a woman, in a U-Haul truck. When it's not clear, we've had witnesses say that they believe that they saw weapons inside there. It's not clear. There was some sort of engagement in a cemetery, and that's when the shooting started. There were two locations for the shooting, one at the cemetery, and then it wound up at this apparently kosher food store, and that's where so much more of the gunfire took place. That's right, and we saw that U-Haul truck by Bayview Avenue with its door open, and so what we're being told is that those two suspects look suspicious in the cemetery, and that's why police engaged them, because they look suspicious. But we don't know any information about them. Folks are not, law enforcement is not telling us any information about who they are. But in that grocery store, the JC Kosher Market, we're told that multiple people are dead inside that building. 4 people dead, and 2 of them are believed to be the shooters. There were 2 other victims. We were also told earlier that 1 law enforcement officer was killed, 2 were wounded, and 2 were hit by shrapnel. We've played you before some of the gunfire that we could hear from the scene. Literally hundreds of bullets over perhaps a 2-hour period. We had our reporters, Alice Gaynor, Hazel Sanchez, Jessica Layton. They were arriving there. While they were arriving, the gunfire was still going on, and as Alice was pointing out, there are echoes. You don't know where it's coming from. As police reported earlier, there was shrapnel, because when bullets hit brick, it tends to send bullets, parts of bullets and parts of brick flying. That makes it more terrifying for people in the area. And many people in this area told us, yeah, they've heard gunfire before, but nothing like this. Yeah, what we were just looking at was an NYPD armored vehicle appearing as though it is retreating from the scene. Good sign here, as it seems like they're just they've got a lot of work to do. They're going to be out here for hours, so this is not going to end right now, but it just seems as though things are more peaceful right now, that there's a little bit more of a sense of calm. And there's a lot to investigate here, because once again, we do not know what the provocation was here. We don't know what these 2 gunmen, or 1 man and 1 woman, we're told, were involved with. It appears they were certainly were heavily armed, and they had what appeared to be automatic rifles or automatic weapons, as you heard our witness say just a few minutes ago. If it was only 1 shooter, he had to have had 2 weapons. So we don't know what the nature of the engagement was. The only thing that we're clear on, or at least what
what we heard from that news conference was there's no indication of terrorism. And, of course, all the surrounding cities, including New York City, always worries about that. And then they do their investigations to find out what's going on. So we're told the FBI, you can see the ATF is there, JCPD, the New Jersey State Police, all these people were engaged in what was truly an extraordinary effort by law enforcement to contain these two gunmen.
Yeah, and while SWAT is still on the scene, their job might be over right now. The job is far from over for detectives because now they have to comb through the scene. They have to figure out who these suspects are. They probably know names, but figuring out a motive. Why was there so much ammunition?
Right.
What were they planning on doing with it?
Or was it just something that they were in the middle of a sale-off? You don't know what they stumbled upon.
Right.
One of the things that strikes me as very interesting when we talked to the head of the school board and we said to him, do you guys plan for this? We hear all sorts of plans for active shooters in schools, etc. But what about what apparently has happened now for a second time? It happened last year during a snowstorm where kids are literally stuck at school hours on end. Perhaps down the road, they're going to have to start thinking about that because we heard the school board president say, hey, guess what, folks? We're going to have to get some food for these kids. If the school doesn't have a kitchen, we got to get food. So this is just one more thing that is going to be planned out of this terrible situation. Okay, next time, law enforcement always talks about the one thing they got to worry about is when this incident is over, okay, how do we prevent this the next time and what can we do better the next time? And this is still very early in this whole investigation to come to those conclusions just yet. But you can bet some parents are going to be a little vocal about having a next time. I mean, we're probably going to be hearing from them. It sounds, at least from the Jersey City School Board, that they were able to get information out through robocalls and the website, but we shall see.
And it's hard for me not to think about this. I didn't have to go through these drills when I was in school.
Could you imagine?
I didn't have to do any of these things when I was in school. So this is just the time we're in right now. And it appears as though the drills, at least keeping kids safe, all of that worked. And, we were told that it's closing the blinds, ushering the kids out of the classroom, getting them away from windows and things of that nature. There are multiple schools within a very close proximity to where all of this unfolded.
Right.
And especially during the most tense moments when people are talking about hundreds of bullets. I think, just to put it into context, there are shooting situations that put schools on lockdown all the time, kind of routinely. But this is something completely different. You don't hear about hundreds of bullets.
Automatic weapons fire going on over a long period of time. This wasn't one quick engagement. Another thing to point out is, and we had been discussing about this earlier before we knew actually what had happened, but we were saying that there had been a period when there was over maybe an hour and a half of a lot of automatic weapons fire. And Alice heard it, all our reporters in the field heard it, a very frightening weapons fire. And we were discussing at what point do the authorities need to engage? At what point do you go in? At what point do you fire back? Well, it would seem there were 4 people dead inside that store. It's not clear who did the shooting inside that store, but the 2 shooters are dead. At least that's what we're being told. So for the authorities, this whole afternoon was so fraught about how to respond. Do you go in? At what point there is a point of risk in public safety? Knowing little kids are right next door, knowing those people who we saw come running out a little later. Remember when we saw those kids, people in the nearby houses? All these people are at risk, and the authorities really had to make some really difficult decisions about when to respond, how to respond, and what would be just the proper way to respond in a situation like this.
Making all of these decisions, all while knowing that some of their own are injured, and then learning that one of their own has died.
If we could get that tape that we had earlier, it was about 40-second tape of the gunfire that went on this afternoon. It's quite extraordinary. You rarely hear this, and we heard the witnesses say over and over again, outside of a war zone. I know there's some veterans who probably heard this before, but this was repeated automatic weapons fire over a long period of time. If we could get that sound, it would be interesting because it would certainly show people who were not there what everyone was up against. Can we listen to that right now? you this sense of what was going on in the street at the time. And our reporters who were coming upon the scene literally said that they could hear it from blocks away. And also the fear is because you don't know exactly where those bullets are. You don't know what kind of an echo you're getting. That sounded, and listening to that gunfire, it sounded like it was right around the corner, but we don't know. You get that echo effect that goes all around the neighborhood. And then what we learned about some of the wounded is you get that shrapnel effect. And for this kind of gunfire to go over for a series of hours really is a frightening situation, not just for the law enforcement, but for these family members. And you got to wonder, and I would certainly wonder as a parent to say, okay, now I'm going to go out and pick up my kid at school. Because right now, a good portion of Jersey City is doing just that.
Yes.
Could you imagine what's going through the minds of these parents?
Hugging their kids a lot tighter tonight.
Yeah, and this was not, we've seen so many horrible active shooter situations across the country where there was literally a gunman in a school. This wasn't that. This was the gunman across the street. So this was a different thing that both teachers and law enforcement have to strategize for going down in the future.
And it'll be interesting to see because bullets go somewhere, they land somewhere, and to find out, did they hit houses? Did they, you know, just what the damage that was done kind of to the area. But those people who witnessed this is something they will never forget. Dick, you were talking about trauma beforehand. It's not just for the officers. It's for the people who were in the area and had to witness this, not knowing what was going to happen. We heard of folks lying down in their homes, hiding behind buildings. You're outside, hiding behind a building. In your own neighborhood. Yeah, and not knowing where the bullets are coming from and hearing a barrage of gunshots. You know, it's just a tough situation for everyone. And so that's why detectives are going to probably remain on the scene all night long. They've got a huge crime scene to process. Now that they've neutralized the situation, now it's time to process the crime scene. They got to find out where all those bullets are. All of that is evidence right now. So it might delay people going home as well because they live within the crime scene.
There were a lot of road closures. Yeah. And that's going to be what will probably be a little bit of chaos for the next few hours because right now there's someone sitting at home and says, okay, what do we do? Do we go and pick up our child who's at the school? The information we have from the Jersey City Public Schools is that you should go to their website, number one, if you haven't already gotten a robocall, and then they will give you information as to what to do, presumably about what your specific school, about where you could pick your child up, because we know that there are a lot of small children who are going to be, at least in that neighborhood, going to have one heck of a story to tell. And perhaps, you know, we always, when we cover stories, we hear that police officers who are engaged, even in a limited gunfire, will go to the hospital to be checked for trauma. Well, imagine some of these officers who were literally in a hail of bullets while civilians are running around all around them, while eventually finding out that one of their own was killed and a few others were wounded. I mean, it's just a difficult situation for everybody. And once again, the hard part for law enforcement is always saying, okay, how did this happen, and how do we prevent it happening again? You can't always strategize that way.
You can't, but these are things that they prepare for, you know, which is good that they prepare for them and providing a lot of mutual aid. You see the EMS task force coming in here now to help out the situation.
Yeah, I mean, here you have a situation. There was also, and we were told an NYPD crane, at least one of our photographers was telling me, an NYPD crane was on the scene. This is what you call all hands on deck for this particular situation that went apparently right up to the White House, because we understand President Trump was informed about it. The FBI was let in on the scene because there's always the concern about something that could be happening in a multi-state situation or perhaps an international situation. And now, just the physicality of getting all this law enforcement out of the neighborhood is going to take some time, and that could probably slow those kids down who are right across the street from this bodega, this kosher food store, as we understand it to be.
Now that parents can go pick up their kids from school, Jessica Layton interviewed a lot of those parents that were right there at the tape, just waiting for that all clear, ready to pick up their kids because they just wanted to have them see them, you know. But again, all of the students and the staff, they were all safe, locked down since probably about 12:30, 12:45 this afternoon when everything began to unfold.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about, you know, almost 4 hours ago, and yet now there are still some really specific questions unanswered. The first one, I think, would be, what was that original engagement? The police officer, the law enforcement said that there was an engagement inside a cemetery. We had information from witnesses, and it was casually mentioned in the press conference, that there was a U-Haul truck involved, that perhaps the suspects were driving a U-Haul truck. Was there something in that truck, perhaps weapons? One witness said that he had heard that there were weapons in the truck. We don't know that for a fact. But perhaps the officers in the cemetery witnessed weapons in the truck that caught the first engagement. Now, I'm pretty confident that it was the suspects who opened fire first, but our understanding is that was the first engagement. Whatever happened there, we're not clear. And then the second question is, okay, they take off from the cemetery and then wind up at this food store. And then the second engagement, we had a long series of waves of gunfire that we actually sat here and listened to. And that went on for at least a few hours based on our calculations. And then there was that silence. So what caused the silence? Who shot who? When, if they did officers engage the people in that store? Did they, worrying about perhaps other people in the store? And now we know that there were other people in the store. These are all these questions that are unanswered right now. And these are things that people are going to want to figure out because they want to make sure that, because it's the one way to find out how to prevent things in the future.
And also why that store? Why stopping in their neighborhood?
Right. Was it random, right?
Yeah, was that random? And do they have connections to this neighborhood?
To the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And maybe that was why there was such a lag after we heard the end of the gunshots, that perhaps they said, okay, maybe there was a shooting, maybe the suspects are neutralized. There was a time we were actually talking about that on the air, that we noticed there was a different level of urgency from law enforcement at the time. They seemed to be backing away. And then we were theorizing that perhaps it was because either they had gotten...
To the Chief Coroner, Judge Cooper Marshall.
May I first express my condolences to the families and the loved ones of the victims of
at various incidents like this. And that's going to make it a little more difficult for the parents who are trying to get in and out of there, because we know there are a few schools in the immediate vicinity, because that lockdown was lifted 15 minutes ago now. But I'll bet it's sometime before we can start moving those kids out of there.
But what this picture does show is just the sheer amount of force, the amount of law enforcement that has been deployed to that area. They're coming from all over the region, quite frankly, to help assist New Jersey or Jersey City Police. So we've got the FBI, we've got the ATF, NYPD. They're in there as well. All hands on deck, as you said, Dick, to respond to this incident right now. So we're just waiting to see how this neighborhood, you know, if they will zero in on the area and just cordon off that specific area and let people go back home yet, or not. This might be just a very wide crime scene. That's what I'm concerned.
And looking, as you pointed out, there was stray bullets in the area, that kind of thing.
Everywhere, and just people might not be able to go home for some time.
The other thing that we saw, Kieran Dillon was at, I believe, the Jersey City Medical Center a few minutes ago, and hospitals in the area, I gather, all had to be, you know, they talked about the hospitals being on lockdown, but the hospitals all had to be on alert. People being called in for fear of something going on, perhaps a mass shooting. It didn't turn out that way entirely, but you can imagine that this one single shooting, we're talking about law enforcement, we're talking about the education system, schools, we're talking about transit, we're talking about hospitals. So much a part of this city, and Jersey City is a big city. It's the second largest city in the state. It's wide, it's spread out. There is a downtown area, but it's very wide, has a lot of residential neighborhoods. I would dare say that almost everyone in that city was affected by what went on today in one way or the other, or knew somebody who might have been affected.
And you know, those hospitals have to stay on alert. The trauma centers getting ready. They don't know who's coming in. They don't know if their hospital is going to be the one chosen to kind of help folks. And we don't know where the officers were taken. I don't know if they were taken to that medical center or
usually
not.
Taken to a trauma center, which is where the best care for severe wounds are. Speaking of that, Kieran Dillon is live right now at the hospital. I believe it's the Jersey City Medical Center. Kieran, have you learned anything in the next hour? Any information coming out of that hospital?
No, Dick, actually, it's been very difficult to get anybody from the hospital to speak to us. We've put in several calls, but I think it's obvious that they're very busy right now. The PR person's voicemail is busy and is full. And when we tried to get inside, we were told that, listen, this hospital is on lockdown. It's been on lockdown for several hours, and we can't really get too close. You can see dozens of police police officers are here directing traffic and really monitoring who's going in and out of the trauma center at all times. So as I mentioned, the hospital's been on lockdown since at least 2 this afternoon when we got here. We know that the officer that has since passed was pronounced dead here at this center earlier this afternoon. Another officer is currently being treated for a wound to the shoulder here. So now I actually, as I mentioned, walked around the hospital's periphery a short while ago, really trying to see if I could speak to people, and was told that no one but staff, patients, and their families are allowed to go inside. So really tight security here right now. Now I should mention that despite the lockdown, the center did send out a tweet earlier saying that everybody was safe. So this lockdown really does appear to be a precaution, but as you can see right now, there's a lot of activity happening here, and we have been waiting all afternoon to see if officials will come out and give us a live update, and if we have that, we will bring that to you. But for now, we are here live in Jersey City. Kieran Dillon, CBS New York.
Yeah. Kieran, what we are seeing are lots of kids behind you.
Yeah, just turn around. I think the kids are finally getting out of school right behind you.
Right, yeah.
And they had a long day in school today. Very, very long day.
And talk about nerve-wracking. And you can see in a big city, this is the way it always happens. A lot of these kids, they're a little older. They're not the little kids, but they're not real old, too. They have to rely on mass transit. And if any of those kids were in the zone, well, that makes it equally difficult for these kids, because what if mass transit was affected? It was affected in the immediate area of the shooting. We don't know how it was in the more perimeter areas around the shooting. But that's saying, wait a minute, is the bus there? Has the bus been rerouted? There is one advantage now in the age of cell phones.
I was going to say that,
you know,
yeah.
there's so, I must say, and this saying, wait a minute, is the bus there? Has the bus been rerouted? There is one advantage now in the age of cell phones.
I was going to say that,
you know,
yeah.
there's so, I must say, and this is an important point, and I know since September 11th, I think a lot of people have spoken about this. After the age of September 11th, I had little kids at the time, and they were too young to have cell phones. But after that, a lot of parents said, the heck with it, give the kids a cell phone. Yeah, maybe we've found out all the trouble with cell phones with kids, but there is that great feeling of knowing when your child is safe, when they can reach out to you. And in cases like this, you know, a lot of these kids were texting in that school and saying, maybe they're saying, I'm hearing the gunshots, they're terrified. But at least their parents know they have some form of communication. And now, more importantly, can you imagine the old days before cell phones? How do these kids get in touch? They go to the payphone on the corner and drop in a few dimes and call their parents. So in this sense, this is where a good situation for kids having cell phones.
And also, Kieran was talking about the officer who was pronounced dead. He was pronounced dead at that hospital. I'm just wondering if they're going to have some sort of procession or something coming out of the hospital later on this evening to honor his life, you know, dying in the line of duty.
Yeah, and you know, it just goes back to the point that we talk about over and over again. These officers, they go out every day. They don't know what they're going to face. They don't know whether they're going to sit on a street corner for hours, or then in the split instant there's going to be a hail of gunfire. And at least one law enforcement officer went into that hail of gunfire and faced it. And we certainly send our sympathies to his family, because what a brave man or woman. We're not quite sure who the victim is right now.
Absolutely. Just a horrific day for officers, for the entire community, quite frankly.
Yeah, 6 people in the entirety dead. That includes 2 shooters. There were 3 victims, 1 police officer. We understand there were people with injuries, shrapnel-style injuries, which you would get when automatic weapons are being fired over and over again. And we understand also 1 officer was shot in the shoulder. We presume that's not a life-threatening injury, and he will recover, or she will recover. And like we said, we haven't had much information given to us about the nature of the shooting, except where it started, where it ended. Not a whole lot about what happened in between, but we certainly got that sense from listening to the videotape, the audio tape of what was going on in that community.
Absolutely, you know, and those that are still in the hospital right now recovering, as you said, it doesn't appear that their injuries are life-threatening. Thankfully, we're really thankful for that.
And you can see, you know, just to make that point, we did lose 1 officer, which is absolutely awful, but we saw the other officers who were responding, and they had the heavy gear and the heavy equipment, and we know that's life-saving equipment. And it's so difficult for officers who are engaging people right in that moment when they have to respond. At least in some situations, we hope all that protective gear could help, especially in an incident where this just isn't the old days where people had handguns with 6 bullets in them. This is a situation where you have absolutely a huge amount of firepower, and the police have to go face that down.
That's right. We have Jessica Layton live at the scene, and just you've been talking to parents all afternoon. What are you hearing right now?
I can tell you, when parents heard that 4:15 time frame where they could go and pick up their kids, they were extremely relieved. The challenge was getting through kind of the maze of police tape that is surrounding us right now. But they were just so excited to get their arms around their kids and to bring them home. And they were all considering what they would say to the kids about what happened here today. With young kids, it's very challenging. There's a lot of emotions that go into this. Certainly, this is not a conversation just for one day, but a conversation for several days about the world we live in and about how anything can happen, and sometimes bad things do happen close to home. So parents were considering how they'd be talking to their kids. They were all saying they were excited to have a nice family dinner. In the meantime, now that the scene has opened up a little bit behind us, several folks are starting to come to the scene to gather more information about what happened, and one of those is this gentleman here, Evan Bernstein from the Anti-Defamation League. Evan, what are you hearing about the victims and where this occurred today?
Yeah, we got reports on the shooting and the shootings that was active shooting that was taking place a few hours ago, and we're right now just trying to get our arms wrapped around the reports that we're getting. We know it was a kosher market. We know that there have been reports of Jewish victims. We know that there's also been law enforcement that were shot and potentially killed, and we are just so sorry for the victims. I think right now we want to get as much information from law enforcement. We've been in contact with FBI, Homeland Security, local Jersey City Police. We just want to find out more information so we can know really what took place here.
I definitively asked law enforcement here, was this terrorism? And I was told definitively, not at this moment. It's not what we believe. There's no indication that says that. But do you think that the kosher market was targeted here?
The reports that we've heard is that right now was not necessarily a biased incident, and that it just happened to be a kosher market where the individuals went in and were shooting. Again, we need to wait for law enforcement to verify all of this. These are just reports that we're getting from different agencies. Again, even if it's not a targeted Jewish situation, it's affecting this community. It's affecting the entire community. It's affecting the young people right now that are in the schools. It's affecting the victims, the people that have possibly perished. The law enforcement agencies have been affected here. This is just a horrific situation, and hopefully we can get to the bottom of what happened.
Have you heard of there being a particular anti-Jewish sentiment in Jersey City as more Jewish families move into the area?
Not particularly in Jersey City. We have seen a rise of different kinds of anti-Semitic incidents, especially in K-12 schools in the state of New Jersey. We've seen a rise in white supremacist activity. Not saying that that's the case here at all. We don't know what this is. It doesn't appear to be that at all. But the overall climate right now to the Jewish community in New Jersey has been a bit on edge. And I think when we get reports of a shooting that takes place in a kosher market, unfortunately our mind goes to the absolute worst. And we're glad that we're hearing that at least it wasn't potentially targeted. But it doesn't mean the victims and the families and the law enforcement agencies affected by this, it impacts them any less, and we want to be a resource, and we're here, and our thoughts are with these agencies and individuals.
In terms of the deceased, we know it's the two shooters, one police officer, and one other person who was in that market. So you do believe that that was a Jewish person from this community?
The reports that we're getting are, again, we want to get confirmation, but that's what we've been hearing from different sources.
How difficult is it to wait right now and to get that information? Is it tough to be patient?
I think it's tough. I think everybody wants to know, the community here, especially on the ground, wants to know what took place here, why this happened, what was the rationale for this happening. To have deaths and this kind of tragedy take place, there needs to be some answers. People need to know what this was. So the climate of fear is so high right now in the community because they just don't know what's going on. But we do know law enforcement at every agency level is doing everything in their power to figure out what's going on here, to give the community reassurance, to figure out what this was.
And the thing I've always said is that even if law enforcement doesn't classify something as terrorism in the traditional sense, certainly this caused terror, this caused fear, this caused panic throughout this entire community today.
100%. This has impacted this community in a very deep way, and the impact is not going to go away tomorrow. It's not going to go away a week from now or 2 weeks from now. And I think the community right now needs to know how they're going to talk to kids, how they're going to talk to other members of this community about what happened here. Unfortunately, we're seeing more and more shootings that are taking place, and I think it's important that we do everything in our power to explain to children this is not the new normal. This cannot become the new normal. We're seeing these kinds of acts of hate and violence that are becoming normalized. And for older people, we know a time where that was not the case. But for younger people, this is becoming the new normal, and we have to do everything in our power to push back on that.
In what way can the ADL be there for these people who frequent this kosher market and who this is part of their daily lives? What would you tell them?
I think it's about being aware of your surroundings, be aware of what's going on. Even this was not a targeted attack. It's just, again, we're in a position now in our country where, unfortunately, more and more of these things are happening. And I think we need to be aware, and I think we need to be as educated as possible to keep ourselves as safe as possible in a society right now that's seeing more and more of these acts of hate and violence.
Evan Bernstein from the ADL, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm very sorry for what happened in this community today. Thank you. With that, Dick and Andrea, I'll send it back to you.
All right, Jessica Layton, thanks very much. Interesting there. We're always concerned about perhaps was this something anti-Semitic. We've seen a lot of anti-Semitic attacks around the city and around the world. The indication there that this was just a coincidence that this happened in the kosher market. So in that sense, these
Никого привлечь не могли.